The Dragon Lady's husband is back for more obscure insight. Hey guys, it's just the regular guy here, the Dragon Lady's husband, and I just wanted to make a video for my wife's channel since, you know, it's been a really long time, you know, since I made a video for her channel, and but it was mostly just because I just wanted to come up with a good topic to talk about with regards to her channel. You know, the last time and the only time, you know, I did a video like this is I pretty much talked about why I don't play meta decks, and even in this format right now, this is still the case. I'm still toying around with a lot of different decks right now, but I'm not a meta player, so, you know, I'm not playing, you know, what are considered some of the most popular decks at this current point in time, which is, you know, Sprite and Tier Limit to Shizu and, you know, things along those lines. But the topic that I wanted to talk about, you know, for this video, guys, is I wanted to talk about how to keep yourself motivated when it comes to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Because all depending on who you ask, but just based on what I have personally experienced playing online and playing at locals, you know, it's not a really fun format to play right now because there are just too many powerful decks in the format right now that desperately need to be hit, and they all do something really degenerate that really prevent your opponent from playing, and there's really not enough floodgates or hand traps in the game right now to even put up a half decent fight against some of these decks. You know, it's, you know, if you want to stand the chance, you know, against these decks, you know, you literally need to be playing the meta itself, you know, if you want to you know, if you want to even put up a half decent fight against some of these really powerful decks. And the fact that, you know, these decks have been incredibly powerful, it's actually demotivated a lot of people from even getting into the game right now. And especially with the new set, Photon Hypernova, I think it is, and the fact that Kashtira is getting all of the rest of its support cards to really make it an incredibly powerful deck. You know, I think it's actually deterring a lot of people from actually playing, or, you know, even trying something that's even remotely rogue. And the fact that a lot of these Kashtira cards coming out in this new set are going to be super expensive, like the price point may be out of reach, you know, for a lot of people, that might actually deter people from actually playing the game to begin with. But personally for me, I'm still finding motivation to actually keep playing, and this is what I wanted this video to be about. I wanted to talk about, you know, how to keep yourself motivated. You know, you don't have to play the meta if you really don't want to, but what keeps me motivated in the game is that I love gimmicky shenanigans. That's what I love. I try to find unique ways to actually beat the meta, but I'm not trying to find, you know, the next tier 0 or tier 1 deck that nobody has ever thought of, you know, to beat these really powerful decks. But what I personally take pride in is that if I can come up with something incredibly gimmicky that can even beat a meta deck just once, or, you know, if I do play against a meta deck that, you know, if I can win 1 game out of 3, then I consider that a victory in my eyes, because the best thing I do truly love about this game is the game's creativity, is the fact that you have tens of thousands of cards to actually go through, and you can actually toy around with as many different ideas that you can. And I love it when, like, players actually go through cards and they start to find obscure cards that might actually put up a half decent fight against the meta, and I love to implement that because in my heart I'm always a deck out player. You know, I've talked about this in my last video. You know, You know, I'm always playing, you know, mill decks. You know, we had a GOAT format tournament last week, and I played the empty jar variant, and that was the deck that I played back in 2005. And I actually got third place with it. And so I'm always a mill player at heart, and I'm always a banished player at heart. Well, Derek, if you're a banished player, then, you know, you should be jumping on top of, you know, Kashtira. That's what Kashtira does, is, you know, they focus on banishing, and they love Dimension Shifter and stuff like that. But the key thing for me, guys, is like, I don't like playing decks that stop my opponent from playing. And unfortunately, there's too many decks in the format that can do that. And, you know, personally, there's a point in my life that, you know, I really wish there were certain cards that really didn't exist in this format. I really wish Omni Negates didn't exist. I really wish cards that stop your opponent from special summoning, you know, didn't exist. But unfortunately, that's just how the game is. And, you know, you can't fault people, you know, for wanting to play the most powerful decks in the format, because why do we play card games to begin with? You know, we play because we want to win. But, you know, guys, if I want to win, you know, there's really nothing stopping me, you know, from playing a meta deck. There really isn't. You know, price isn't really much of an obstacle for me, but it's just like, I don't really like playing decks that, you know, stop your opponent from playing the game, because I think the true strength of any card game is the actual interactivity. And the fact, and, you know, when you cut interactivity off, you know, to the opposing player, then, you know, what's the point of like even playing? And I think for a lot of people, you know, I think it's actually stopping a lot of people from actually getting involved in this format to begin with. You know, unfortunately at our locals, you know, attendance has taken quite a hit, and, you know, people think it's not because of the format. People think it's just because of school or job or, you know, other responsibilities. But, you know, what I often find, you know, the people who often defend this format are the people that are actually playing the most powerful decks in this format. So it's understandable why they would think this format is fair, because they're actually winning, they're actually placing. And in the grand scheme of things, guys, you can't fault people for that. You know, people are going to play the decks that are going to give them, you know, the greatest likelihood of winning. And as frustrating as it may be, you can't really fault people or hold it against people if they want to play those kind of decks. But, you know, you look at the most powerful decks in the format right now, you know, you have Tearlament Shizu that can literally spit out their entire board either on their turn or on your turn. You have Kashtira with the new support that can literally stop you from using any of your main monster zones. You know, if they go full combo, you've got Flunder Freeze, that if they summon the Wind Barrier statue, you know, stops your opponent from special summoning. And you know, you have Sprite, you have Pure Sprite, you have Runic Sprite. You know, I've even seen Sprite decks using some of the Natria cards, and they shove out so many interruptions you can't really find a way to play either. And there's really not enough hand traps between the Forbidden Droplets and the Dark Ruler No Mores and the Infinite Impertinences that might sort of kind of slow these decks down, but they really don't. And in all honesty, guys, even though we're only a month or two away from a ban list, I don't think there's anything that they can do in that ban list that can really stop, you know, the degeneracy in the format right now. You know, they can take a few cards out of it, but in all honesty, to actually put some balance back into this game again, you know, this ban list would have to be huge. And I don't really see that happening, because ultimately, you know, for Konami, you know, they want to make money, and they have to make money to keep themselves going. So they're gonna print the cards, and they're gonna reprint the cards that, you know, that players want to keep themselves, you know, from winning. But even if you do feel demotivated in this format, guys, like, even if you can't play the decks that you really want to, what I really want to say to you guys is keep finding the motivation to do it. Because the thing is that there are always interesting little techniques you can always add to your favorite decks to make your deck a little more on the rogue side, that can actually put up a half decent fight, you know, against the meta. And the thing is guys, I'm no card mechanic. I'm not like a lot of the other popular Yugi tubers out there. You know, I can't tell you, you know, the surefire way of, like, like beating the meta decks, but I always love to experiment. You know, like the decks I'm currently playing right now is, you know, I'm still a Banish player, so, you know, like the Banish deck that I'm playing right now is I'm doing the Golden Castle Grand Maju, but I'm loading it with like a lot of hand traps, you know, D-Shifter and D-Shifter and Drolling Lockbird, and, you know, some other main deck, side deck cards, you know, like a Dimensional Barrier, and There Can Be Only One, and stuff like that. And, you know, even though, you know, I lose with the deck a lot more often than what I win with it, it doesn't really demotivate me from playing, because I'm always testing interesting aspects. You know, there was a couple of weeks ago, you know, I was toying around with an idea of using a card called Switcheroo with the incantations that, you know, that my wife often uses, because if you put an incantation on your opponent's side of the field, you know, they can't use the extra deck. So, you know, I used to put a couple of incantations on my side of the field, and the moment they'd summon 2 monsters on their side of the field, you know, I'd use Switcheroo so that the imps would go on their side and I'd take their 2 monsters, and that would theoretically lock them out of the extra deck unless they tributed the imps off, or, you know, something along those lines. And, you know, it seemed like it was a good idea starting off, but eventually people just learned, okay, I'm just going to shove the imps into attack mode, slam them into my opponent's monster just to get the imps off the field, and then I can go back, you know, to my summoning in, you know, main phase 2. But this is a perfect example of what I talk about, never losing my motivation in this game, because I always like to experiment. Sure, it's easy for me to look up a deck profile of what some of the powerful decks are, and price point isn't really much of a barrier to me. And even though it does take a lot of skill to play these decks, it's not my style. And, you know, there are some matches that, you know, my Golden Castle Grand Maju actually has a really fun matchup against. I really love playing against Branded Despia Bestial. My matches against that deck are incredibly fun, incredibly back and forth. Pure Sprite, I have a lot of fun playing against, you know, like I said, because I use Super Poly, I use Lava Golems, I use Alpha, the King of the Mystical Beasts, and those decks are really fun. But, you know, the other ones that really stop your opponent from playing, you know, Keshtira, Tearlamenta Shizu, you know, Floowandereeze, Freeze, and even there are some Branded Despia Bestial builds that use Raw's Disciple to summon it to your side of the field, so you can't even a special summon. The thing is that, you know, unfortunately, it's just how the game is, guys, and there's ultimately nothing we can do about it. And I think it's going to take a ban list or 2 before, you know, the format, you know, resolves to any kind of fair normalcy. But at the end of the day, you know, you just can't throw up your hands and say, you know, I'm just going to quit the game. It's just so unfair right now. The thing is personally, do I believe that a lot of these decks are unfair? Yes. Do they use degenerate tactics? Of course they do. But the thing is I don't want that to give players just enough motivation to just up and quit the game. Because there's always ways to work around things. You know, all of a sudden, you know, I'm seeing people, you know, main deck Chaos Hunter and, you know, other cards, you know, to stop opponents, you know, from doing their nasty shenanigans. But, you know, if you're devoted to a archetype or a specific type of deck that you've always been faithful to, that you've always been able to enjoy, don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to try out different strategies, because even if it may not work 100% of the time, or maybe 80 to 90% of the time, if you can just get that one win against a really powerful deck that everyone uses, you know, that should fill your life with like a little bit of happiness and a little bit of joy, to know that your creativity, that, you know, thinking outside the box, that you know that you managed to beat one of the top decks out there, you know, with really obscure tactics. And, you know, deep down for me, that's what keeps me motivated in this game. That's what keeps me playing, is I love thinking outside the box. You know, every once in a while I'll go through all my old binders of like the core Yu-Gi-Oh sets, the Yu-Gi-Oh sets from like back in the GX days and the 5Ds days, just to see if there are any cards that I can use that can actually be relevant, you know, in this format. You know, back when I got into the game and I started looking when I started looking at really old obscure cards, you know, I found a card called Spiritualism. And it was a card that sends a spell or trap back to the opponent's hand, and it can't be negated. It can't be stopped unless you have unless your opponent has a card or a monster card that, you know, that doesn't allow you, you know, for your opponent to play spell cards, you know, like Spell Canceller or anything like that. But, you know, Spiritualism used to be a good card, you know, to take care of Mystic Mine. So the thing is that if you're feeling demotivated from where the current Yu-Gi-Oh format is, it's understandable, but just don't give up on it, because there are always ways that, you know, you can retool the decks that you're devoted to, and you don't always have to play the meta if you don't want to. To be honest, I like it when people can use rogue decks to actually beat the most powerful decks in the format. You know, in a way, it's like sports. It's like I always love to root for the underdog. Yes, I know what these powerful decks can do. Yes, do we play this game because we want to win? But it's like when a sports team is in the playoffs and like you're a low seed team, like you're an 8th seed team going against a 1st seed team. You know, I always love to see the upset. You know, when I see, you know, YCS results, and, you know, I see a deck that completely catches someone off guard, or is a deck that is not considered meta and it does really well. These are the things that, like, I like to see when it comes to the Yu-Gi-Oh format. And you know, I love ideas that actually think outside the box. So if you're feeling demotivated from this format just because of how unfair a lot of the decks are, just take a breath. Just look at what you're playing and just find interesting and obscure ways of actually fighting against the most powerful decks in the format. Because guys, if I truly wanted to win so bad, I could easily build any of these super powerful decks and learn how to play them. But that's not my style. It's never been my style. And the thing is that I'm always trying to, you know, promote to my wife to actually think of obscure ideas to actually actually fight against the meta decks. You know, you may not win very often, but, you know, at the end of the day, that's okay, because, you know, I play against enough people online, and, you know, when I use gimmicky strategies, every once in a while, you know, I'll still play my Inferno Tempest deck, and, you know, when I beat a meta deck with like Inferno Tempest, you know, I get a whole string of insults, you know, from players just like, oh my god, I lost to something, you know, so gimmicky. And in a way, you know, it gives me a sense of happiness, because like I did beat a powerful deck with like something incredibly gimmicky. So just never lose motivation, because there's tens of thousands of cards that you can use to kind of retool things. You know, you don't always have to play what's popular or what's powerful, because the true joy of this game is the actual creativity behind it. And you don't always have to spend hundreds of dollars to build the best deck out there, but if you're willing to put in the time and the energy and the brain power to actually find obscure cards, you know, to fight against the meta, then, you know, then that's all you should really need, you know, to keep yourself motivated in the game, if you don't want to play these super powerful degenerate decks. But that's just my insight, guys. It's just, you know, I recently watched a video, and, you know, I see people using cards like End of Anubis, you know, from Ancient Sanctuary and Silent Graveyard, which actually stops your opponent from activating cards in the graveyard. And, you know, these are the kinds of ideas that, you know, I like to see, you know, for people, you know, to play against the meta. And just remember, guys, it's not all about winning. It's like, I love having fun, and you know, that's the key thing. And it's just, and, you know, going to locals, I've had some really good matches. You know, I've seen people put the Bestial engine in Thunder Dragons. And that was actually, and, you know, going against my Golden Castle Banished, that was actually an incredibly fun deck. I've seen people use the Bestial engine in Cyber Dragons, and that was an incredibly fun match. You know, I've seen, you know, I played against Labyrinth, I played against Goatee, and, you know, those are actually really fun back and forth games. But, you know, when you're playing against an opponent where you don't have a chance to even interact because they put up Cash Tier board that doesn't even allow you to summon a monster, or they have a tier limit board that either they can summon on their own turn or they summon on their turn, that, you know, that prevents you from from even playing against it. And literally watching a tier lament Shizu mirror match is literally a stress test, you know, gone out of control. And at the end of the day, guys, it's just a card game. It's never meant to be taken seriously. And at the end of the day, if you can't have fun, then you know, what's the point of playing? You know, I always tell the people who get salty and angry, especially online, look, it's only a children's card game. There's no reason to get upset on it. Because ultimately, the true purpose of this game is to have fun. And I always find the best part of having fun is to be creative. So no matter what kind of degenerate or unfair format that, you know, we might be in, just don't let yourself get demotivated by it. You can still play what you want to play. You know, I still love playing Valkyries, but Valkyries can't even hold a candle to what's even played right now. But who knows, maybe in a couple of sets later they might get a little light fairy support that can make them playable, and I might be able to play them again. But until now, they're just a deck that I just have casual fun with. So I'm still going to find a way to make Banish or Grand Maju or Inferno Tempest work, because that's just the type of player I am. So at the end of the day, you guys, just don't allow yourselves to be motivated. Be creative. Find different ways to combat this format if you don't want to play the most powerful decks that this format has. And there's nothing wrong with that. I always love a good rogue deck more than seeing the same deck being played online 10 to 20 times. But regardless of whatever format it is, I never lose motivation because I always like to be creative. So I certainly hope, guys, that this advice that I can give you, you know, helps you keep yourself motivated in the game no matter what is literally thrown at us. All we can do is hope that the ban list addresses some of these problems, but that's all you can do is wait. And so just find whatever gimmicky ways, you know, to fight against the meta. And if you don't want to play, and if you don't want to do that, you know, there's nothing stopping you from playing the meta decks to begin with. So anyway, guys, this is Just a Regular Guy with his obscure insight as always. So as the Dragon Lady often says, play the game, not the fame.